what you're doing, I don't care. Yeah.
Okay, I am Chris Maholsky with Sam Lemon and Alex Pelzel, and we're interviewing Rosa Horst. So why don't you just start from when you were a kid? What do you remember about being a kid?
But I remember when I was a kid, I lived pretty happy on a farm, and I was in Bukovina, and Bukovina had belonged to Austria. In the 1700s, my forefathers, from my dad's side, they immigrated from Bavaria in Germany to Bukovina, and many other people in those days. There was a lot of problem in Europe and a lot of poverty. And Maria Theresa, Austria was very big in those days, like 2/3 of Europe was taken over by Austria. If you look in history, you'll find it. And it was in that stage, I don't know the exact year, but no, it was in the 1700s. And so many people volunteered to take Maria Theresa up on her offer that she was taking in immigrants in that part of Austria. It was a colony of Austria, it was called Bukovina. The reason it was called Bukovina because later on Romania took it over at the end of World War II. And Bukovina is the name in Romanish. In German it was called Bubenland. I have no idea what it really originally was called. I was only 7, remember. So anyway, that's where I lived. My folks had a farm, and I'm a horse and buggy girl because that's what we had in those days. There was no electricity, there was no running water. They had deep dug wells like you watch old Western shows where the well in the yard, you know, and you go down with a bucket and get your water. That's what we had in our yard. And the lamps we had were petroleum lamps, you know, that you lit up at night and put them off when you went to bed, of course. And horse and buggy was the transportation. People were plowing their fields with very old-fashioned plows and different things, nothing modern, no tractors, no trucks. I never saw a truck over there. And my grandparents didn't live far from us, probably 3 miles across the field. And we had Jewish neighbors that were very wonderful friends of ours. And my dad farmed, but my dad originally was from a family of 13 children. Several of them died during the cholera season. And 7 boys and 1 girl remained alive, and he was one of those, somewhere in the middle. And anyway, when the Nazis came in 1940, well, actually, the Nazis had come in August in 1940, and the first thing they did is they went to all the Jewish business places and they cleaned them out, you know, like they were shopping, pretend shopping. I didn't see it, I can only tell you what I heard, okay? So, I mean, I can swear to it. I just know my dad and my uncle talking about it. That was in a neighboring town, Rodouts, where they had seen it, where they had been in the Jewish stores and they get all the materials. Things were made in those days, like people made suits from material and clothes and everything. It wasn't like the modern day nowadays where everything's made in the factory, you know. And so the fella came to the person who was doing all this deciding what they're taking. He said, "The bill is that big already. Are you sure you're not done yet?" And they knocked him over the head and shot him. And my uncle was just blown away. And he was telling my dad that. He says, "There's something going on with us Germans. They all look alike. They're all tall, and they got the black uniform. And they're meaner than hell. And they're mean to the Jews." Well, then we had it somewhere in August, and they took them out during the night again. They do a lot of stuff. We were taken out overnight too. They do a lot of stuff in the night. Sneaky bastards. So anyway, they took them out in August, and wouldn't you know, on the 1st of November they took us out. And we were of German heritage. Like I said, my father's side, the family, they came from Germany originally, and my mother's side from Austria. You can't get much more pure German than that. And at the end of World War II, like I said, Romania took over Bukovina, and then it became under Romanian leadership. That's why a lot of that stuff is in Romanian language. You know, like Budapest and Radouts and all those things, it's Romanian. This was our cities where we were living not far away from, you know. And our town, I just know the German name, that was Neufrathaus. No, there was an old Frathaus and a Neufrathaus. Those were big farm villages, and I remember as a child, like up to the one side of us, there was all forestry, and at the edge of the forest, the gypsies used to live, and at night they had big fires. I was fascinated by that, and they would do dances out there and sing. Seemed so happy, you know, and that's my memory as a kid. And I remember going to visit relatives with a little horse and carriage, and in the winter with the sleigh and the horses and the little bells and the songs that you sing. I lived them, you know, jingle through the snow, you know, all that. And so like I said, on the first night of November they came, and we had, they had actually, before they took us out, we had a 2-day warning to get some of our stuff packed up. We were allowed so many pounds per person that you could take along with you. And we were going to be taken into what they called back home to the fatherland, because the Russians were moving in from the north, and Romania was not going to be our country because that's going to become communist from what they saw. And so they scared the hell out of us. And they didn't give us much choice. We said we had to go. We had to go. And so in the middle of the night, my folks' neighbors came, and they drove a horse team and drove us to the train station in Radhaus, which was 14 kilometers from where we lived. 14 kilometers from where we lived. And it was in the night, midnight. And all I remember, the dog howled, and cat was on the roof. My mom cried for 2 days, never stopped crying. And they were still a pretty young couple. Like I said, my mother was nursing her third baby. And I was little. I had just turned 7. And my brother had just turned 5. And the train trip took 2 days, 3 days before we ended up in Regensburg. We were never allowed to step out anywhere. Everything was closed up. The windows were darkened. So you didn't really see where you were going. And that was already pretty shady. And it was a very tight atmosphere. You know, everybody was scared. And when we got out in Regensburg, they had big ropes all over where they fenced things off, because people came to see. There was lots of propaganda to not come close because those are wild people. We heard that from other ones when my dad worked and stuff, and people tell them, they talk, you know. They said that's why you saw those roped up areas. They didn't want anybody to get too close when he got off the train. Not to interfere, I guess. And all they did then, they called your names and stuff, and then they went through, it's almost like clinics when you go where they have curtains and stuff, and people went through examinations, and anybody from 14 years and up, they got labeled, and they got a number under their arm, the blood type and a number. And I found out later on that all the people who went into concentration camp or, you know, being put away, they all had numbers. There was an identification number that they put under your arm. I never had it because I was only 7. So I lucked out. I don't feel bad about it either. So we were there for a little while. I cannot tell you exactly how long. I know it was winter, and I know we spent Christmas there. But when Christmas was over, we ended up in the second camp. I showed you this picture here. And this second camp, right here with that little, see that little mark? That's my dad in the bunch. I can't tell which one is mine, but I just can't see that good. We were in front of the camp, but that used to also be a convent. And the town Salzkofen was a regular farm town. It was not a city. But they had a big convent there, and so they put a bunch of us in there. And they held us there for a few weeks, and then we got shipped out to Poland. And that's when the fun began. The fellows, they got loaded up early in the morning on big trucks and hauled away for where they were doing hard labor. They were sworn to secrecy, and they couldn't talk about it. So that helps a lot. And some of them died on their jobs, but that didn't happen overnight. That took a while, you know. And like I said, we were living in well, I told you that earlier. We were living in great big old rooms in that big building that they called Lager. It had a number, this camp had a number. We were in Lager 4 first, and the next one was Lager 8. Lager 8 had more, the rooms were not quite as big. Instead of being 400 or 500, we were like 300 maybe in a room, you know. That was the difference. And it got more organized as time went on. They had one building where there was just like a nursing place where the babies were all in there, and the people that had babies, and there was a nurse there, and they were in that building taking care of them in shifts and stuff to keep the babies away from the rest of the people. And during that time while we were there, in 1942 in January, my little brother was born. He was the fourth one in the family. He had crooked little legs, but later on, not right away, but as time went on, he got little crooked legs and he couldn't walk. And I remember I carried him on my shoulders all the time. So that made a big bond, made a big bond. So we were there till, well, lots went on. I can't tell everything that went on because I would bore you to death. I would, really. You know, it was, yeah, but it was, the youth might be interested, me it was boring. We ended up early in the morning, they had like a roundup, you know. Everybody had to be out of their beds and participate in what they called an appel. Well, appel would be, what is it, the roundup, right?
Yeah.
Would that be the right word?
I think so, yes.
When you're telling the news and the plan for the day? Okay, well that was the morning roundup then, and they started out with some of the Nazi songs where you had to have your hand up so long, where you were patronizing the flag and stuff while you were singing the songs, and you were hungry as hell, you know, and you were weak, and it was no fun. That's why I don't even like to think about it. And then breakfast was being served after they got through telling what they had planned for the day, and then breakfast was served, and after that, like my dad and all those who were able-bodied to work, they got loaded up on the trucks and away they went. And camp went on, and us kids who got old enough, like I was one of those kids, because I was the oldest in the family, and in the old country you started school at 7. So I started school in college. College was that city I showed you on the map in Poland. We had to walk there. I cannot tell you, it was 3 miles or 5 miles, I have no idea. It was a very long walk, and it was winter. I remember I froze my feet, I froze my fingers. My little coat that I had when I left home in 1940, by 1940, winter 41, 42, when you're young, you grow. The sleeves were too short. My shoes, the shoes were too small. My dad cut the toes out, so my feet would fit in, you know what I mean? But then those feet got cold, and they froze. And that's how it was. And there was no mercy. And I remember we got sick, we had the mumps in there, and my little sister ended up with inner ear infection, and they put her in some room, they called it the death room. When they were too sick, they just put him in there to die, and rather than spend any time with him. My mother had fallen down the basement stairs there, and she was pregnant with my brother, and she was hemorrhaging. So she ended up in that sick place, what they call that. Krankenhaus, they call it in German. Krankenhaus means, you know,
Sick house.
Yeah, a sick house, you know. Kind of like a makeshift hospital. You know, they didn't see no doctors though. They were in other places. But my mom was laying, and they had Polish people that they took out of their homes, and some of them were servants, they were cleaning ladies and stuff, and some of the fellas got into either hard labor, they got shipped to Germany for to be workers on farms over there, you know, prisoners. They just did a whole bunch of mishmash. And I remember my mom telling me that, well, I remember her talking about it, not just telling me, but she was telling, there was an older lady in our town that used to come and visit, Frau Kohlers, and she was a very, very close friend to my mom. And my mom kind of took to her like it was her adopted mother or something. She told her all her secrets and everything. And I was just like a little sponge, listening what was going on, but I'm not supposed to hear. Anyway, she was telling, she said, well, if it wasn't for that Polish lady who came in, she says, and I was crying, and she asked me why I was crying, I thought to myself, long later, I thought to myself, how did she talk to the Polish lady? We talked German, and we talked Romanian. I don't ever remember talking Polish, but is there must be a relation in the language or something that you can communicate, because she got that Polish lady to understand. She told her about a little girl, and that Polish lady took care of that little girl, which was my little sister, and people were real big on herbs and stuff from our country and stuff, and that lady cooked up chamomile tea, and she brought it there to work in a little rubber ball, and would rinse out her ears every day, and that healed her ears. And after a few days, when that nurse who walked through and stuff, that's funny, that kid is improving. They couldn't figure out why. So they put the kid back to where the other kids were then. She was saved from the dead room. She had another chance. And in the meanwhile, my mother gave birth to my little brother. And then eventually she came home after about, I think, in those days they had the women 8-9 days, you know, wherever they gave birth. And so she came back to the camp again, and then, like I said, my brother was in that one building where they had the babies. There was, at the time, I remember there was 30 babies. He was the only boy out of 29 girls and one boy. Yes, that was really something remarkable. Okay, my nose is running, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. So we were there, like I said, from somewhere after Christmas, somewhere in the middle of the winter, until 1943. In 1943, in the early part of the summer, we were moved by train from Poland back into Germany, and that was in Baden. You can find Baden on the map. That's kind of in the middle of Germany. And another convent called Neusatzig. That in English that would mean a new corner. Neusatzig. It's a new corner. What a name for a convent. It was a beautiful convent, and there was lots of room. Then we again were not like 400 people to a room. We were in like a family to a room. For a little while, that only lasted 2 weeks. And then they shipped us out to Lorraine, part of France, because Germany had occupied Lorraine, which was part of France. And they had a good plan there. They were cleaning out the forests and taking all the lumber for them into Germany, and they needed loggers. And that's how come my dad was one of those people that were shipped from Poland all the way to that camp in Neusatzig, and then we were all shipped close to Metz. It was not in Metz. Metz was 41 kilometers, but I can't remember the name of the city where we landed. And that was between Metz and Wessingen, which we ended up staying for close to 2 years. It was 2 months less. Let's see now. From June 23rd until the last night in August, it's quite a bit less than 2 years, isn't it? Okay, that's how long we were there. We got there and we got picked up by the farmers who lived in that town, and each one picked up a family, and nobody knew nothing, nobody told you nothing. You were just told, we're going here, you're getting off here, and you know, the reason we were on that train was because Germany needed loggers to clean out that forestry in Lorraine while they were there. And that's what they did in other countries too. They just raped and stole. And so the next morning, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We ended up in the evening in the town which was called Wessingen, and the family across the road from us ended up to be the one that brought us from the train station to that little town. And we lived in the house across from them, which had been emptied by one of the French families. They went into France when they heard over the shortwave radio. They heard about the Germans moving in, and so many of those French people moved into France. They escaped, you know, and left their homes and everything, their pots on the stove. It was just so much like when we left, you know. I remember my mom crying a lot, and I can't see why. It was just so much that related to us too, you know, and you can't be human not to have any feelings, you know. So as time went on, we were living there. In the next morning, they had a morning roundup at the marketplace, and the men from that bunch who came there, they got a new bicycle, and they got orders and direction where to go with that bicycle. They were driving to work early in the morning and riding to work early in the morning and back at night. So they put in long days in the forestry, cutting down trees and, you know, cleaning them up and stuff. Then they got hauled into Germany, that lumber. And so they were doing that, like I say, from the 24th of June until the last night in August. Because the last night in August, the soldiers were kind of lining up on the edge of town again. That town was close to the woods, like there was woods on the one end, on the one side, almost like home in a way. Because at home, not far from us, there was the wooded area, the forest, and we used to see the gypsies. But here you didn't see no gypsies. It was just a forestry, and I was a kid, you know, nosy kid running around and playing and stuff, and it was getting dark, and my little brother said, "Don't we have to go home?" I said, "Yeah, we have to wait a little longer. I want to find out what's going on. I don't know why they're moving in here." And he said, "Dad's going to beat the hell out of us." And he was right, he did. But we got a good beating for it, but we did find out that they were moving in, and I tried to tell my mom and dad about it, but he didn't want to hear of it. He was in his rage, and he was going to beat the hell out of us for not listening. And then my mom wondered, and my mom had heart trouble. And so during the night, at 2 o'clock at night, Nazis came and knocked at our door, and not just our door, but everybody's door. That's what they did. They gave the warning to evacuate. We had from 2 o'clock in the night till 4 o'clock in the morning to be dressed, grab a few things, get on to your neighbors, or whoever had one in flatbed hay wagons, because some of them were farmers there, you know. And so we had to kind of pull together, you know, because we had no transportation. And so when that Nazi left, my dad went over to the neighbor. The name was Hubertus, and he told the neighbor, he says, the Nazi said that we can go with you on your wagon because you have a horse team and a wagon and we don't, so we'll be traveling with you. And he got pretty mad, and he said he doesn't have room for us, and he was pretty arrogant. And anyway, my dad was walking back. My dad was a hothead too, though. So he was walking back to the house, and he said, "Well, let him shoot you, I don't care." And so the wife came running after my dad and begged my dad not to go through with it, you know, to report them, to just that they're gonna take us with them, you know. And so we had a part on that. Have you ever seen a flatbed hay wagon like the farmers have? Have you? Well, then you know what I'm talking about, okay? So we were on part of that wagon, some of whatever belongings that we could grab. And I know we had almost a whole loaf of bread in the cabinet, and some butter, and I don't remember what else. You didn't have no refrigerator, so there was no meat or anything around. And not enough time to really think, because there was such a circus, such a confusion, you know, so fast, and to get dressed, and what do you put on, you know, this is still summer, how long are we going to be on the road, where are we going, we didn't know. And so anyway, we got with what we had and dressed the best we could, and got out there and got loaded up, and away we went. And the farmer and his wife, they ended up getting off in Saarland, because that was their hometown. We traveled through Saarland to go into Rhineland-Pfalz. We didn't know it at the time, but that's where we were heading, retreating with the military. And then they left the wagon team with my dad because they were at home. And the way things were ordered, also I forgot to tell you that we had to register in every town we went through. There was orders in German, they had that. You know, you never went from one town to another. They had to know at all times where you were. That was part of the way the rules were in Germany, you know. And so as we were retreating, we finally came to Saarland, where they were at home, and they left us, and the horse team and the wagon got left with us, and there was a big fuss about it, but he was told by the Nazis the horses and the wagon belonged to the government, and you belong to the government. So away they went. So there was our own team after that, and for while we were with it, you know. And we traveled all the way to Kaiserslautern, to many other places, but Kaiserslautern was one of the biggest places, and you'll find that on the map if you look. Kaisers means Caesar, Kaiserslautern. Kaiserslautern, can you remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. That was a pretty nice city. Later on, the Americans put a base there. That's still there now. The Americans still have a base there. And later on, it became almost like an extra little city with American families. So I had, my son had a brother-in-law. His sister taught over there in Kaiserslautern. She taught school because she was a school teacher. She taught school there for the American kids who were with their families there. This is like long back now. I'm talking now in the 60s, you know. In the 60s when I met them. And so in Kaiserslautern we got orders that we will be getting off the track with them, and we're going to be trucking along to Rodenbach by Grinstadt. There was, Rodenbach means Red Creek, or Red, yeah. It's not a Red River, it's a creek. Yeah, Rodenbach. There's a Rodenbach by Kaiserslautern, and there's a Rodenbach by Grinstadt. Grinstadt is a city, not quite as big as Kaiserslautern, and Grinstadt means green city. Okay, so we were close to Grinstadt, and that's where we aimed to, and that was a big farm, and we come to that farm, and that's where we were ordered to, the report, and they needed workers there, and they would take the horse team and everything. It was a big farm of, I don't know, it was over 1,000 hectare. Hectare is, one hectare is 4 morgens. I don't know what that is in English. It's pretty big, very big. There had lots of people working there. And so we ended up living way up high in the 3rd story up in that house, and we had circle stairway to go up and down the steps. We all fell down on them many times because they're so dangerous. But that's where we lived. And we were there a short time. We had no stove. Everything was done with wood and coal in those days. And so the neighbor lady let us cook on her stove a couple times, but he was not too friendly. So we talked to the girls who were not far from us on the other side. Those were Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian prison girls. And they were probably in the 20s, maybe mid-20s, some of them. They were forced labor just like some of those other fellas were in Lorraine there and other places. They did that all over. They just took people out from one place and put them in another place. And so those girls were real kind to my mom, and they made friends, and they let us cook on their stove. And through another friend, through another neighbor, was a very kind neighbor, he introduced my dad to a hardware owner in the neighbor town, 4 kilometers from us, and that guy offered my dad help him get a stove. He said, I haven't got one, but I got a good friend in outside, 50-some kilometers from where we are. He says, I'll give you a referral, and you can go with that and get that stove. So he went with his horse team all the way to outside, 50-some kilometers. And there was air raiding in those days, and anything that moved many times got shot by the airplanes when they were flying over. Now the ones who flew over, they had bombs, they were way up high, you could hear ooh. And the ones who came real deep, they were shooting at anything that moved. And I forgot to tell you something. On the trip, while we were on the road after we had left, in that night trip, we left our town, it was on the 3rd day we were kind of resting on the edge of the woods, you know, and that's when one of those attacks came. I'm so glad I remembered. And there was some airplanes were flying deep, and woo, before we know it, and we tried to get out and get moving, and they had already started shooting, and they shot up 3 wagons and burned up. And we were in between those wagons. We were just lucky. We could have just well burned up too. And the horses got very excited and started to to jump. And you know, when have you ever seen horses when they're hitched up with both sides, you know. But one side was unhitched when they were resting, so they could eat grass along the side of the road and stuff, you know. And the horses got excited, they tried to pull with just that one little thing hitched onto it. And my dad had to slow them down, and he tried to get us to get up there real quick on the wagon, while my mom was trying to hoist up the two younger kids. She slipped and she got dragged by the horses in the wagon. And it took me years later when I realized, I thought my mom was so old. My mom was only 31 when that happened. And she got dragged by the horses in the wagon, and we thought she was dead. We put her on the wagon and we couldn't wait, you had to keep going. War is very hard and very rough, and I'll tell you one thing, it's not for cowards. You become a hero before you know it. You have to be. If you want to live, you got to be tough. And so that was my mom on top, those few belongings that we had with that rough, those flatbed wagon wheels, you know, there was no rubber wheels in those days. So that was all real rough, you know, every little bump, and not even an aspen or something. And the worst part is this was the end of the month. And on the first part of the month, on the first day of the month, unless it was a Sunday, you would get your stamps for the whole month. Things were rationed in those days. We're talking 1944 already now. Things were very rationed in those days. And people couldn't buy anything, not a loaf of bread, not even a heart roll without your stamps. And your stamps you got allotted every month, and then every week was so much you could buy with them. Very well planned out. And but we had no stamps, and every little town we got to, we tried to apply, we couldn't get them because we hadn't been there long enough. You had to be longer than at least a week in that town to apply, to be able to apply. And no place where we longer than not even a day. We were just passing through. So the whole trip lasted us 14 days, because we left the last night of August, and we ended up on that farm on the 14th of September. So during that time, we lived on a little bread we had along. There was another family, they had butchered a pig the day before. Well, nobody knew that we was going to be moving, you know. Well, they had grabbed what they could and took along, and in the first couple of times, they were cooking some stuff in the woods there. We ate some of that too, but then after that, there was nothing. We just had half-ripe apples and pears and half-ripe grapes and plums, and that's all that you could steal along the way, because the country is very rich in fruit, you know, fruit trees and vineyards, and, you know. But, you know, we all need bread and other things too, but it was very rough time when I think, because 2 times on that whole trip, we were allowed to stop at two orphanages, and they invited us in to have a bowl of soup. And so twice on that 2-week trip, we had a bowl of soup. Other than that, we had nothing but half-ripe fruits and stuff. And we were pretty sick with diarrhea and stomach problems, you know. My brother next to me, he was just passing blood. We thought he was going to die, he was so sick. But when we got there, and like back to those Polish girls and those Russian girls helping us with, let us cook on their stove and stuff, and then the neighbors next door, my mom had visited with them and stuff, and they let me come over and help. I was almost 11 then, and I was allowed to do a little work. I mean, they accepted me to do a little work for them, so I was helping with running stuff through some big old hand grinder where they ground up great big beets, and they were feeding their cows. They were farmers, and they had milking cows, and they would give us a gallon of milk, and later on I got 2 gallons of milk. I was a good little worker. Brag, brag, brag. But I was very proud when I come home. My mom would say, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. What would we do if it wasn't for you?" But what would I do without my mom? I'm so glad she lived, you know. We all got to pull together. May I go to the bathroom? I really got to go to the bathroom.